Worried about falling property prices? Don't worry, the government has your back. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Several years ago, I made the joke that don't worry about crashing property prices, the government will just bring in Mortgage Keeper, just like JobKeeper. Now that was a joke. It was not a prediction, it was a joke. I was alluding to the fact that, well, our government, at the time a Liberal government, loved to intervene in the economy so much. And now we have a Labour government and they love to intervene in the economy so much. And well, both sides of the House have implemented policies to prop up housing. So there's a precedent. So for those hoping for a dramatic correction in the property market that may finally make housing affordable to the average punter, don't worry, government will sweep in and rescue everyone. But Mortgage Keeper was a joke. I didn't actually think that they would implement that. But now with shared equity, maybe it's not that ludicrous. So I want to have a look at this article from the ABC here. Property prices are falling. Don't freak out or get excited. Okay, because, well, there's a precedent. It's now been established that we have governments that will intervene in the economy, and when they do, they use the housing sector to do that. It's a very effective way of actually stimulating the economy. To hell with the consequences. I mean, if you ignore the fact that we're in the middle of a construction apocalypse where residential builders are going under left, right, and center, subbies are getting smashed, and the cost of everything is going up, and the fact that the stimulus for the housing didn't actually make housing more affordable. If you ignore all of that, it's very effective at just keeping people moving. Sure, it's a profitless boom for the Aussie citizens working in that sector, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Everyone feels like they got a deal. Well, we learn the real lesson here is to perhaps get the government to step away and let the market adjust. Just an idea. Just an idea. So property prices are falling. Don't freak out or get too excited. By Daniel Ziffer for the ABC. So there you go. You got to have your Australian flag at the front of your spec home. There you go. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, to be honest. It's perfectly fine. It's just a pretty standard design. So don't freak out about falling house prices. But don't get too excited about potential bargains either. And, well, he's got a point there. And there's a few reasons. Do I have that chart here? I don't have it at the moment. I'll have to bring it up. Essentially, Australians live in 3 cities, guys. Melbourne, Brisbane, and Sydney. That's where a huge amount of people want to live. So there's going to be that demand, support for housing. You also have legislation that's constantly increasing the cost of housing. We've got new energy efficiency requirements that have come in and accessibility requirements that have come in. These things may sound good. Okay, they sound good in the soundbite, but they cost money. Now, for someone who's well-established and wealthy and is making these policies, they may think, over the last 40 years, if I had have been forced to put this in, it would have saved me money. Fantastic. But someone just trying to get a crack in the door, get their foot over the threshold into a house, every bit is an impediment. Every cost increase, every legislation that you do for ideological reasons pushes people out of housing. And I mean, for a stable, prosperous society where people can have equal chance at lifting up and succeeding, home ownership is a key part of that, everyone. It needs to be affordable. And I would argue that it's not just the greedy developers, but it's the legislation, it's the not in my backyard crowd, and it's the intervention overheating the market and causing damage. That's part of the problem with housing. And I honestly don't think anyone wants to solve it. I don't think either side of Parliament will solve it because it's a bloody complicated issue. You've got council, state and federal government all trying to come together to solve this problem when they're all playing different roles in it and pushing the blame onto each other. So it's all just a bloody talk fest. Maybe I'm getting too cynical about it all, guys. The median price of dwellings, houses and units, has fallen 1% in the past month, 7.2% in the past year. In some places, the falls have been even steeper, such as Sydney, 13.8%, and Melbourne, 9.3%. Yeah, but we're coming off a huge bloody peak. Let's look at here. We'll look at SQM, national house prices. Let me just refresh that. There you go. Okay. Whoa, we're down, but look how high it is. Look how high property is. It's nuts. It really is. You got to think about it. Why all these people? Well, no. You work in a business, you run a business, you take on the stress and responsibility, you come home, you relax, you jump on your bank or whatever, and you see, oh, look, the bank has valued the property up this much more in this period. Oh, boy, with no stress. No wonder everyone wants to become a property bro in this country. And that reduces our innovation. Anyway, this is how property and housing, it's such an important part of Australian civilization, culture, and our economy. It's all interwoven. So you've got all these innovative people that rather than pursuing a business, creating jobs, creating innovation, breaking the mold, they'll just get in a property bro. And they'll just flip speckies, or they'll just stack up speckies. Sure, there's a need for that. But you've got to understand that's taking intellectual capital from one sector and deploying it to another. Which in the long term would be better for our overall prosperity? I'd argue perhaps, a diversity of economic activity driving up economic complexity. But we don't want to hear that, do we? It's just property. Where's my economic complexity chart? Oh, I don't have it here now. I've broken my bloody Stream Deck, so all the slides I bring in are out of order. You delete one thing on your Stream Deck and it breaks everything. Anyway, let's back to this. Enough rambling. This is why I shouldn't record it early in the morning. So here we go. The changes in dwelling, Sydney, the median. And this is houses and units, guys. Don't get too excited. So it's the shitty unit in the triangular fail that's got dodgy foundations and the concrete hasn't been vibrated in the partition walls, so you got gaps between the fire protection. I'm half joking that's happened. We've seen that happen. Anyway, so $1 million. Melbourne 746, Brisbane 700 grand. Change. So I mean everything's falling now, but these are still very high prices. Anyone who's bought a few years ago, these are crazy. Okay? How many of you in Brisbane who bought a few years ago? I was talking to a gentleman yesterday. He got a place in a city for 240 grand a few years ago. And he's thinking, oh, what was I doing? It had an outhouse. He's done it up. It's on a sloping block. And years later, he wishes he bought several of them. Adelaide. Oh, they're still up, 646,000. There were some good bargains you can get at Adelaide. At least psychologically, it felt like a bargain. I mean, look at the delta change from Sydney to the rest of us guys. Us povos, except the Canberrians. Us povs in the rest of the country, we're all going to be affordable. So someone in Sydney will sell up their shit box and come and buy a shit box for 300 grand less in Brisbane and probably have a better lifestyle too, to be honest. Better weather, better food, more attractive and intelligent people in the state. Oh, it's just a win-win. And a better rugby team. Sorry, guys. So anyway, back to this. That would be worrisome if prices hadn't gone up by 29%. Yeah, we're coming off a peak. The only people shitting bricks about this are the people in the media and YouTubers like myself who refer to it because it gets attention. That's what it does. And the people who FOMO'd in. If you FOMO'd in at the peak, I don't know what to say. I mean, you just got to toughen it out, okay? You got to toughen it out. This is your 1990s bloody, when interest rates were at 18%, boomer moment. You'll be okay, I hope. I checked the calendar. There's only one Christmas in that time. Meanwhile, in the areas outside capital cities, values were up by 42%. Yeah. 42%, guys. A 29% price hike in the value of homes across the nation, 42% in country areas. And in the same amount of time as it took to air 1.5 seasons of Bluey, and he's showing the Bluey house. My children have discovered like Bluey remade content by content, like Bluey theories. People will make Bluey theories on YouTube. Maybe I should start doing a Bluey theory YouTube channel. There was longer between the scheduled release of the movie No Time to Die and when people sat in the cinema to watch the latest Bond back in 2021. No matter where the prices go, even if the fall continues, it is likely that several elements will remain constant. First home buyers will struggle to accrue a deposit. Yeah, that's not going to change. If anything, that's going to get worse. Even if prices go down, cost of living is skyrocketing. Everything is getting more expensive. Hey, beer's now up again. Beer's gone up. They've raised the beer tax. Awesome. Fantastic. And, we've got Labor's new approach to the market, which is going to drive up energy costs. Just wait and see. Your cost of living is going to go up, guys. Okay, this isn't going to be any better with this mob than the last mob. It's just still going to be expensive and shit. Rents will keep going up. Yeah, we've got increased immigration coming to Australia as well. That's going to increase the demand for accommodation. International students are coming back. Yeah, well, governments will step in if there's any threat of substantial slowdown in house prices or the construction industry. Now, there's the call. There's the takeaway here. That, what's his name? Daniel, is it? Yes, Daniel's added here. Government intervention. Now, I'll probably put a poll up when we live stream this, but let me know in the chat, guys. Do you think the government would intervene to prop up the housing sector or the construction industry here in Australia? I'll have another shot of my nice morning coffee. But I think we all know the answer to that. What are the odds? So when people are predicting, all this mortgage stress and these big corrections, sure, yeah. What's more likely? A huge correction in the housing market, so housing is finally going to be affordable, or Labor coming to the rescue with shared equity? Just be honest. What do you think is more likely here in Australia? Not what you want, not what you think is fair and reasonable. What do you think is more likely? And they'll be calling for it. I just hope they don't call for lockdowns to force people to save deposits. I'm being facetious. That is a joke. That will... Shit, that... It might have. Only in Australia, guys. Only in Australia. No. We don't have none of those bullshit climate lockdowns. We got housing deposit lockdowns. You're not allowed to have that smashed Ave. Bolt was right. It's smashed Ave. Although I wouldn't mind a smashed Ave for breakfast. So, the median house price is the middle. If Australia had 99 properties ranked in order of price, the value of number 50 would be the median. If we use average, it would frequently skew up by the sale of a few mega mansions. There you go. Beautiful, beautiful house there that I would just... rocking horse. Like there's kids playing in this house. I mean, come on. Look how clean it is. No toys everywhere. No, sorry. I've got many young children. We focus on the median price in cities and regions because it's a marker of where a place's real estate sits, but it's not the best marker. You'd know from where you live that's not one housing market, but widely disparate parts of even the same suburb. The other element that the median price ignores is volume. The number of properties on offer for sale. When prices are low or falling, people only tend to sell for 3 reasons: death, divorce, or moving to Denver. And the last one hasn't been an easy option for most in the past few years. But when the volume of properties in an area is limited, prices rise. This lures more people to eventually sell and feeds into a rise in the median house price. The new numbers from property data firm CoreLogic showing broad falls that might have you sweating chill. In every city and region, dwellings are still worth more than they were at the start of the pandemic in early 2020. Yeah, we can't really call this a property correction until we're below pre-pandemic levels. That's what I'd say. If you bought into the FOMO, you bought in the craze, okay, you may take a bit of a shave, but the rest of us are still sitting pretty. And many have locked in bullshit low interest rates still, and I mean, it's gonna be a bit of a shock to the system suddenly when rates return to normal for many people. But it's for a couple of years, it's free money. Unless you're in a few highly specific groups, falling house prices aren't a problem. So sympathy is needed. Is it really? Or shouldn't we be directing the anger at the government for causing a lot of this mess? Just a question there. Maybe we need to have the RBA taking account of house prices in their decision-making process. Just saying. So, most would have sympathy for vulnerable groups. People who bought recently are looking at falls in the value of what they paid for. They might be worried because if a shock event such as death, divorce, or unemployment causes them to need to sell, they'd probably lose money. Yes, but that's a part of life. That's the risk you take. Okay, you just got to deal with it. But fingers crossed that doesn't happen. If they stay in for years, they'll likely ride out this bump and values will keep rising. Yeah, that I suspect is going to be the majority of what happens. You'll start to see people, for the first time, tighten the belts and, live like an adult, to be brutally honest. Why? Because Australia does not have enough places to live, not close. On 2020 data, we got 411 dwellings for every 1,000 people. In Greece and Italy, the figure is 550. In Spain, Germany, and Finland, it's over 500. The average of the OECD group of similar economies is 468. There you go. We've got a supply issue. It's not going to get any better with the construction apocalypse. And you've got Labor promising to build 1 million houses, which here's an interesting theory I'll put to you out there. I have an argument that you reach a certain point in overheating of the housing or construction sector that results in negative feedback because you've got greater defects and greater issues in construction. I'd like to find that sweet spot. I think, that could almost be a research project because we've got all this government stimulus. Like I saw an economist yesterday posting about UK public housing, how much they built back in the day, how fantastic it was. Yeah, but it led to tremendous issues in dodgy precast construction. They were just stacking these things together. They weren't checking, they weren't sealing. So years later, they had to weatherproof these buildings. And you know what they did? They clad them in flammable material that burned and killed people. This is the problem. When you overheat a sector, it leads to defects. So sometimes slow and steady may be better. What do you want? Do you want affordable housing that can lead to defects and might be abandoned, might lead to death? Or do you want slower housing, which is less affordable? Maybe we need the slower housing, which is less affordable, but change the legislation to make it more affordable. Maybe we reduce the taxes and the requirements, the non-life safety issues in housing that we can reduce to make it more affordable. I'd make the argument that it's better to get someone in a house earlier that may cost more to run over the lifetime of a house, but they're getting in there and they're building wealth, capital, and stability. I'd argue that's better than a tiny saving in a power bill over 40 years. Anyway, people who lied on their loans might be in trouble. We've heard this before. We discussed it yesterday. We'll have to see. I'm sure there will be some, and the ABC will milk it for all it's worth. If someone tells a bank they earn more and spend less, they'll likely get a loan that is too big for them to safely make the repayments on. Yeah, I know when we were shopping around for mortgages, we were offered way more than we wanted, which was nuts. I'm glad we didn't take it. I'm glad I think I actually found the cheapest house in Brisbane, guys, or one of the cheapest 3-bedroom houses in Brisbane because it was falling over. Literally, it was falling over. If interest rates keep going up, and most economists believe they will, that will pile extra misery on people who've extended themselves beyond what the banking guidelines were. So rent pain. But who should you really be worried about are the 1 in 3 Australians who rent and those struggling as inflation rips money out of the wallets of wage earners. According to the data, the cost of rent for a unit in Brisbane or Sydney jumped more than 15% in the past year, 12% for a house in Adelaide, Brisbane or Perth. After international students and workers were forced out of the country in early 2020, rents for apartments in the university-dense inner cities of Melbourne and Sydney plunged. Now it's rocketing back. Inner Melbourne rents are up almost 30% over the past year. Inner Sydney rents are more than 20 times higher. There you go, guys. It's coming back. We're returning to normal. And that's before a likely surge of overseas students after a policy change in China pushes people to complete their courses in Australia rather than online. We're already seeing immigration numbers and visa applications tick right back up. It's going back to normal, everyone. For renters, there are no substantial improvements to their rights on the political horizon. The more competition for dwellings and wages that are barely moving while being eroded by inflation in the essential things you can't live without, housing, food, and fuel. Well, we could reduce the excise on fuel. Most of fuel is tax. Wouldn't that be a great idea? Let's reduce the tax. Find some government services, cut those, reduce the tax, so you've got less of a burden on the average Aussie. I'm sure we can find the money. Find a way to do it. You know, just cut some bullshit there. There's tons of stuff you can trim the fat, trim 5% off every department right there. Homeowners might be distressed about a brief fall in the value of their assets. If they're sold now, they might lose money. Given how tied our economy and politics are to housing, it's unlikely the worst case scenario of price falls of 30% or more could occur. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I would have to agree with his call there, honestly. I can't see that happening because they'll intervene. Guys, we don't have a free market in Australia. Okay, Australia is not a libertarian society. Okay, we don't have a free market. Australia is a bunch of Karens and dibber-dobbers, guys. Okay, just I'm surprised no one, some people are shocked at that. So guys, there we have it. You know, let's have a bit of a talk about that article. So I think Daniel is right on the money there with a lot of the calls he's making. I think some people will be frustrated, won't believe it, but we've seen this precedent. One thing in architecture is that we study a lot of historical precedent, and I would argue there's ample precedent for government intervention in the housing market to mitigate any significant declines. Or, I mean, if we get a housing downturn, that's going to flow through to the rest of the economy. So what does the government do when the economy is in trouble? Well, what did Rudd do? What did ScoMo do? Stimulate housing. That's what you do in Australia, guys. And, I mean, it's not like the builders are going to win through all of this. They don't. We've had a profitless boom. You overheat the sector. You can't make any more money. You know, costs are going up. I did a bloody post on my community tab. The concrete bloody mix that I'm buying, the sand and the aggregate, you know, from the landscape supplier, it's gone up $7 a cubic meter in 3 days. They got me in the fields, guys. They got me personally. But, I mean, there you go. I think it's going to be more of the same. So you can't blame people. Honestly, I cannot blame people for FOMOing in, for wanting to get out of the bloody rent rat race and get into a house. I mean, they would have taken their super. They may have done a bit of the dodgy, got whatever they could to get in, over it. Can you blame them? Because if you're waiting on the sidelines, your deposit purchasing power is getting eroded all the time. The longer you wait, the more chance you have of actually having to spend that money to live on. So, I mean, what's the solution here? We've got to really take a step back and reduce government intervention in the housing sector and let it self-manage for a period. I can't see it happening. I cannot see there being the political will here in Australia. There'd have to be a generational change. And we don't have a young generation that's pushing for more individual liberty and freedom. We're going the other way. So you tell me your opinions on this one, guys. What do you reckon? Do you think Daniel's on the money? I think he is. I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me this morning. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. Check out Heise BIM and Heise Does. And if you want to support me, you can financially on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links, buy our pocket squares, or call us if you need an architect. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. And a shout out to my friend Mike Martins, whose channel is taking off. He's just burst through 20,000 and is headed to 30,000 subs. Good on you, mate. Check him out if you haven't. I'm sure a lot of you already are fans of his channel. Take care, guys. I'll see you next time.